Black woman refused to upgrade her seat. She froze their $800M stock buyback plan with one call. Airports are places where name tags, suits, and net worth often fade into the chaos of check-in lines and departure boards. But sometimes, a single passenger carries far more than a suitcase. She carries the power to change destinies. One chilly November morning, a black woman named Felicia Jefferson boarded a routine flight to Chicago, anticipating nothing more than an on-time arrival and a fresh cup of coffee. Instead, she found herself tangled in a web of subtle discrimination. A denied upgrade might sound trivial, but when Felicia finally picked up her phone, that single call set off a tsunami that froze an $800 million stock buyback plan, leaving a corporate giant reeling. Felicia Jefferson stood at the massive windows of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, watching the planes take off with mechanical grace. Each fuselage glimmered in the mid-morning sun, a reminder of how modern life stitched distant cities together in a matter of hours. She wore a neatly tailored navy pantsuit, her black pumps polished to a shine. She had arrived early enough to avoid the usual scramble. She had business in Chicago, a midweek conference that might shape the future of a large healthcare firm, one she had recently invested in through channels linked to her family's philanthropic foundation. As she stood there, her mind drifted to the day's schedule. She had a meeting set at the Palmer House in downtown Chicago with a group of financial executives from Morgan Stanley. The conversation would revolve around a major philanthropic initiative, building specialized pediatric medical centers in underserved communities. At 43, Felicia had spent the better part of her adult life juggling philanthropic work, strategic investments, and mentorship programs. But her achievements hadn't come easily. She remembered the day she'd scraped together a scholarship for Harvard Business School. Back then, many had doubted a girl from rural Georgia could handle the intensity of an Ivy League environment. Yet here she was, no longer that shy scholarship student, but a formidable business mind whose influence reached from healthcare to tech to real estate. While waiting, Felicia pulled out her boarding pass from her handbag, first-class seat 3A. She'd become a frequent flyer over the years, her mileage status a testament to countless cross-country journeys, bridging philanthropic endeavors and corporate strategy sessions. This seat wasn't just a perk of her position, it was also a necessity. Long flights gave her a chance to finalize proposals, communicate with her network, and occasionally even catch a moment of rest. But she harbored no illusions. Traveling as a black woman in first class sometimes invoked raised eyebrows or unsolicited comments. Still, she rarely encountered overt hostility. Life taught her to let the small slights roll off, focusing on the bigger battles that needed fighting. As the minutes ticked closer to boarding, Felicia made her way to the gate. Nothing hinted that this flight would prove different from any other. In fact, the gate agent offered a friendly smile and complimented her gold star mileage status. Felicia felt the tension of the morning subside. Maybe it would be an uneventful travel day after all. That's exactly what she wanted: efficiency, calm, and an on-time departure. Boarding began for first-class passengers, and Felicia walked down the jet bridge carrying her laptop bag. She found her seat, 3A, settled in, and politely nodded to the elderly gentleman in 3B, who was already flipping through a magazine. The flight attendants bustled about, ensuring overhead bins were closed. She accepted a glass of sparkling water and unfolded her laptop to glance at her presentation slides. The synergy between philanthropic work and corporate investment could be a delicate conversation, and she wanted her pitch to be airtight. Just as she was about to power on her device, the same gate agent from earlier stepped on board. He walked directly to Felicia's row, gazing at his tablet as if searching for something. Suddenly the agent looked at Felicia and said, "Monsieur AM, there's been a slight change in seat assignment. Could you collect your things and follow me?" Felicia, initially puzzled, offered a patient smile. "I'm sorry, is there an issue with my reservation?" The agent pursed his lips. "It appears your seat's been reassigned." Felicia calmly showed him her ticket. "I was confirmed in first class. My boarding pass says 3A. He responded with a curt nod. "Yes, but we have an oversight that needs addressing. You'll need to move to economy until we can straighten it out." The elderly gentleman in 3B looked up, startled. Felicia's heartbeat thudded in her chest. She wasn't new to flying, and a last-minute seat reassignment, especially one downgrading a confirmed first-class reservation, was anything but common. "No disrespect," Felicia said in an even tone, "but I booked this seat weeks ago. It's not a free upgrade. There must be a misunderstanding." The agent's lips formed a tight line. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am. Could you please step into the aisle so we can solve this quickly?" Other passengers watched the exchange with hushed curiosity, some with pity, some with confusion. Felicia glanced around. This felt humiliating, being asked to leave a seat she lawfully paid for, with no valid explanation other than an unspecified oversight. Something about the agent's stance told her it was more than a simple mix-up. Felicia rose from her seat, but her mind raced. She decided not to make a scene. Instead, she grabbed her bag and politely followed the agent up the aisle. As she left, she heard a few murmurs. One flight attendant cast an apologetic glance in her direction, but no one openly objected. At the front of the plane, Felicia faced two airline employees. One was the same agent, and the other wore a crisp uniform that suggested managerial status. The manager, whose name tag read Robert Clark, regarded her with a glance that was neither welcoming nor particularly polite. "Miss Jefferson, it appears your seat was mistakenly assigned. We'll be accommodating you in economy for this flight," Robert said briskly, rarely making eye contact. Felicia inhaled calmly. She'd faced bigger conflicts in boardrooms. "Can you explain why my seat was mistakenly assigned? I booked through your website. I have the confirmation code, and the cost was fully paid. Was there an overbooking in first class?" Robert exchanged a wary look with the gate agent. "It's not exactly an overbooking situation, but we need the seat for another passenger, that's all I can say." Her frustration flared. "Let me get this straight. I'm being moved from a seat I paid for because you want it for someone else. That's not standard procedure. If there's an upgrade issue, it should be resolved with alternate solutions. I'm a loyal customer. Could you please be transparent here?" The manager maintained a rigid stance. "Ma'am, these decisions are final. If you'd like to take this matter further, you can contact our customer service line. Right now we have a flight to board, and we need your cooperation." An uneasy hush fell over the immediate area. Felicia sensed the conversation was going nowhere. She could argue, but the plane was boarding, and time was short. She clenched her jaw. "Fine. But trust me, I will not let this go." Felicia took the new boarding pass. They offered something in economy near the back of the plane. She wanted to protest how their tone bordered on condescension, but she also realized an airport gate wasn't the ideal battleground. Instead, she'd gather more information and address it from a position of strength later. The economy seat turned out to be a middle seat in row 27, squeezed between a tired mother with a crying infant and a lanky student playing loud music through headphones. The whir of the cabin's air conditioning drowned out everything else. Felicia took a moment to close her eyes, trying to center herself. She was furious. But she also carried a lifetime of coping strategies for situations like this. She looked around. Several passengers in adjacent rows appeared either distracted or sympathetic. The mother next to her offered a weary smile. "Long day, huh?" Felicia forced a nod. "You could say that." Her mind spun with possibilities. She thought about simply letting it go. She could file a complaint later, speak to a supervisor upon landing, or contact their corporate office. But something about the arrogance of Robert Clark and the gate agent compelled her to demand accountability. She was done being polite in situations like this, especially when the discrimination, though unspoken, felt as obvious as a bright neon sign. She recalled a conversation she'd had months ago with a friend who worked high up in the Department of Transportation. They'd been discussing airline compliance issues, especially around overbooking, seat assignments, and the silent biases that sometimes crept in. Felicia had also recently read an article in the Wall Street Journal detailing how a few major airlines had faced lawsuits over discriminatory practices. The memory ignited a spark of determination in her. Before the flight took off, Felicia typed a quick email to her assistant: "Need immediate contact with airline's corporate PR or legal. Possibly scheduling a meeting. Will explain later, Felicia." Then she powered off her phone as the announcement came to switch devices off for takeoff. As the plane ascended, Felicia stared out the tiny window, the city shrinking below. A swirl of thoughts enveloped her. She had no idea that this minor inconvenience would snowball into one of the biggest crises the airline had ever faced. But she had a hunch. Once people in power got wind of what happened, they wouldn't stand idly by. She certainly wouldn't. The moment the plane touched down at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, Felicia turned her phone on. She had multiple missed calls and a barrage of emails. One was from her top aide, Janice, who had done exactly as requested and contacted the airline's corporate office. Another was from a board member at a major philanthropic foundation Felicia chaired. Word was traveling. Felicia quickly scanned the messages. Janice's email spoke to a friend at the airline's regional HQ, their disclaiming knowledge. Also, asked if you might consider a settlement or voucher. Not sure what that means. Please advise. Janice, board member's message: Felicia, heard you had some travel trouble. Let's talk. I have a contact at the Department of Transportation who might help. Felicia exhaled. She felt a surge of gratitude for the supportive messages. She also felt an undercurrent of indignation, a voucher to hush this up. That was a shallow attempt at restitution, especially when the root cause felt more malicious than a simple seat inventory glitch. She navigated the busy terminal, her phone pinging with updates. She had little time to dwell on the matter, though. Her next appointment with Morgan Stanley was in less than an hour downtown. Grabbing her luggage from the carousel, she hopped into a black sedan waiting outside. As the driver sped toward the city, she put her phone on speaker with Janice. "Miss Jefferson," Janice said, "I know you're busy, but you have to hear this. After I told the airline's regional office about the seat downgrade, they said it's standard overbooking procedure. But we both know you were checked in on time with a confirmed seat. They offered a $500 travel voucher." Felicia's voice tightened. "It's not about the money, it's about the principle. They can't do this to people. And if they're comfortable enough to do it to me, imagine how often they do it to folks without the resources or know how to fight back." Janice paused. "I agree. Also, I found out from an inside source that the seat was cleared for an executive VIP who came on board late, possibly a high-level sponsor for the airline or something. They specifically targeted your seat because it was the last first-class seat available. It's rumored they didn't even check who was occupying it until they walked on." Felicia felt her grip tighten around her phone. "All right, Janice, I'll handle it from here. Thank you for the heads up. Let's keep this quiet for now, but be prepared. I suspect we'll need more information." She hung up, her mind swirling. Perhaps the passenger who took her seat was some big shot, someone the airline valued more than a frequent flying black woman. In that moment, Felicia decided she would not let them reduce her to a second-class passenger in any arena. If it took every connection she had, she'd ensure accountability for the airline's behavior. Felicia barely had time to catch her breath before stepping into the opulent lobby of the Palmer House Hotel. Polished marble floors and grand chandeliers exuded elegance. Despite her frustration, she switched into professional mode. She had a philanthropic pitch meeting with Morgan Stanley executives who had flown in from New York. The group included Karen Jenkins, a managing director known for championing healthcare initiatives. During the meeting, Felicia delivered a compelling presentation on how specialized pediatric centers in low-income areas could drastically reduce infant mortality rates and childhood illnesses. Karen Jenkins and her team nodded with genuine interest, but Felicia's phone kept buzzing call after call, text after text. Finally, after wrapping up the discussion and securing a tentative agreement for a multi-million-dollar partnership, Karen ushered everyone out, leaving Felicia and her alone in the conference room. "What's going on with your phone?" Karen asked with a friendly chuckle. "You seemed really focused, but I could tell something big was happening in the background." Felicia sighed, setting down her iPad. "It's a personal matter turned public fiasco. Ever heard of a passenger in first class being downgraded without explanation? Well, that happened to me today." Karen's eyes widened. "That's unacceptable. Are you filing a complaint?" "Among other things," Felicia replied. Then she paused, deciding whether to share more. Karen was a trusted ally in philanthropic circles, but she also had connections in the financial world that reached far deeper. "I'm trying to determine if there's a pattern of discrimination by the airline. I suspect it's not the first time they've done this." Karen crossed her arms thoughtfully. "What airline are we talking about?" Felicia leaned in, voice low. "Global Skyways." Karen's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition. Global Skyways just announced a huge stock buyback plan a couple of months ago, $800 million. They're trying to boost shareholder value. We at Morgan Stanley did some underwriting for them. Could that be relevant in any way? Felicia shrugged. "Possibly, but it seems a bit far-fetched that a seat issue would connect to a stock buyback." Karen gave a half smile. "You'd be surprised how even small PR nightmares can derail big corporate moves. If news gets out that Global Skyways is systematically bumping black customers from first class, or any customers for that matter, it can tarnish their brand. Shareholders get twitchy about that kind of controversy." Felicia felt a sudden jolt of clarity. "So, if I went public, the airline's share price might suffer, especially when they're trying to instill market confidence with that buyback." Karen nodded. "It's a leverage point, albeit a nuclear option. You have to be absolutely certain you want to pull that trigger." Felicia closed her laptop. "I'm not looking for revenge, but I want them to realize they can't simply treat people, especially people of color, like they're disposable. If shining a light on this forces accountability, maybe that's what needs to happen." Karen placed a reassuring hand on Felicia's shoulder. "If you need any help or insider perspective, count on me. I believe in your cause. And let's be honest, your philanthropic track record, your standing on multiple boards, your connections, they speak volumes." A single phone call to the right regulatory agency or media outlet could put the brakes on anything Global Skyways has planned, at least until they fix this. Felicia managed a grateful smile. "Thank you, Karen. We'll see how they respond to a more polite approach first. But if they try to brush me off..." Karen nodded, her eyes alight with the kind of seriousness that signaled solidarity. "Then we burn that old playbook and force a new era of accountability." Back at her suite that evening, Felicia opened her laptop to find an email from Global Skyways Customer Relations. The tone was cordial, but not apologetic. "Dear Miss Jefferson, we regret the inconvenience you experienced on your recent flight. Our team has investigated and found that due to an internal systems error, your seat assignment was not properly recorded. We understand the frustration this caused and would like to offer you a $500 travel voucher as a gesture of goodwill. We appreciate your loyalty and hope to serve you better in the future. Sincerely, Global Skyways Customer Relations. Felicia's hands shook slightly. A systems error? No mention of the manager's attitude or the abrupt nature of the forced downgrade. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no accountability for the potential discrimination behind the move. She felt an anger she rarely allowed herself to feel. She composed a polite but firm reply. To whom it may concern, thank you for your message. I appreciate the attempt to address my concerns. However, I must reject the $500 travel voucher. This is not about seeking compensation, but ensuring such incidents do not happen again to me or to anyone else. I was not simply inconvenienced. I was publicly embarrassed and treated with disrespect. Having been forced out of a seat I purchased, I request a more transparent explanation and a formal apology. If I do not hear from an executive-level representative at Global Skyways, I will consider all options available to me. Sincerely, Felicia Jefferson. She hit send. For a few minutes, she stared at her screen, heart pounding. It was out of her hands. Now she had issued a clear ultimatum. Her next move? Wait. She understood corporate protocol well enough. Usually, they'd wait a day or two, weigh their risk, consult their legal team, then respond. Felicia decided to spend the rest of the evening focusing on the philanthropic projects that brought her to Chicago, but her mind wouldn't let her rest. Memories of the gate agent telling her to step aside replayed, each time more jarring than before. She forced herself to try to sleep, anticipating a busy day tomorrow, both with philanthropic meetings and what she suspected would become a more heated dispute with the airline. The next morning, Felicia woke to an inbox full of messages. A surprising one was from a journalist at Bloomberg, inquiring about a potential incident involving discriminatory seat reassignments at Global Skyways. The reporter asked if Felicia had any comment, noting they had received multiple tips that a high-profile passenger had been wronged. Felicia's heart skipped. She hadn't shared the story publicly beyond a few close contacts. Someone within the airline, or maybe a bystander from the flight, must have leaked it. This changed the game entirely. Media involvement could escalate the situation into a front-page controversy. She called Janice, who picked up on the first ring. Janice, any idea how Bloomberg caught wind of this? No clue, Janice said. But I can confirm that a few airline staff have been gossiping. One of your philanthropic associates overheard mention of it. Possibly it leaked that way. Honestly, it was only a matter of time. Felicia rubbed her temples. I need you to craft a neutral response for me. Something that acknowledges an incident but doesn't go into detail yet. That's wise, Janice replied. We don't want to tip our hand until we know what the airline's next move is. Felicia hung up, mind racing. She opened her email to see a response from someone named Michael Harrington, who was listed as Vice President of Public Relations at Global Skyways. Miss Jefferson, we sincerely apologize for any discomfort you experienced. While we stand by our initial findings that a systems error caused your reassignment, we are committed to addressing any concerns you have. Please let us know a convenient time for a phone call so we may discuss an amicable resolution. Best regards, Michael Harrington, VP, Public Relations, Global Skyways. The tone was more professional than the first email, yet it still pinned the blame on a nebulous systems error. Felicia quickly drafted a reply, suggesting a call that afternoon. She wanted to see if they'd offer a genuine apology or continue to talk around the issue. That afternoon, Felicia found herself in a private lounge at the conference center, phone in hand, waiting for the scheduled call with Michael Harrington. Promptly at 2 o'clock, it rang. Miss Jefferson, good afternoon, a smooth male voice greeted. Mr. Harrington, "Thank you for calling," Felicia replied, keeping her tone polite yet assertive. "I'd like to express Global Skyway's deepest regrets," Harrington began. "Our primary goal is ensuring passenger satisfaction, and we certainly failed you in this instance." Felicia listened carefully, waiting. "I appreciate that sentiment. However, I need more clarity. Can you tell me how the seat I purchased ended up reassigned to another passenger at the last minute?" Harrington paused. "We're still investigating the details. We've learned that the flight was flagged for overcapacity in first class. It appears your seat was mistakenly categorized as a vacant seat. When a VIP client arrived late, the flight staff used that seat." Felicia felt her anger simmer. "So, you're admitting it wasn't really a systems error, but a reclassification of my seat for a last-minute VIP?" Harrington coughed nervously. "The system labeled your seat as vacant due to a glitch. The manager on site, Mr. Clark, didn't realize it was occupied by a confirmed passenger. He made an executive decision. While we understand how this appears, I assure you it wasn't targeted discrimination." Felicia frowned. "Let's suppose I believe your system was flawed and Clark was ignorant of who was in the seat. That still doesn't explain why, once the mistake was noticed, I wasn't given the courtesy of rectifying it. Instead, I was effectively forced out." Harrington's tone grew strained. "We admit the manager's approach was regrettable. We'd like to extend more than a voucher, perhaps free upgrades for a year or a personal flight credit of substantial value. And of course, we'd issue a formal apology in writing." A wave of frustration tinged with resignation swept over Felicia. "Mr. Harrington, I'm not looking for flight credits. I want a commitment to internal changes training, accountability, a clear anti-discrimination policy. You see, I'm not the only one who's ever faced something like this. If you're not prepared to address this systematically, I might have to escalate. I'm certain you're aware that a story about discriminating against a black passenger can have consequences beyond PR nightmares. We're talking public trust, regulatory scrutiny, investor confidence, especially with your upcoming stock buyback." A sudden silence. Then Harrington spoke carefully. "We'd like to avoid a media circus. Miss Jefferson, I'm sure you understand that even a rumor of widespread bias could damage our brand. What specifically are you asking for?" Felicia's voice turned steely. "I'm asking for direct engagement with your CEO or someone on the executive board. I want an internal review. I want the manager's decisions investigated, not just glossed over, and I want you to communicate these steps publicly. Because if you don't address it openly, the public will find out anyway, especially now that the press is sniffing around." Harrington inhaled sharply. "All right, I'll relay your demands." "You'll hear from us soon." Felicia ended the call, trembling slightly. She had made a stand. A single phone call had the potential to shift the entire power dynamic, but it was a risk. Large corporations often circled the wagons when threatened. If they perceived her demands as a direct assault, they might fight back with legal maneuvers or try to discredit her. But Felicia had no intention of backing down. Meanwhile, at Global Skyway's corporate headquarters in Dallas, panic brewed in the executive suite. The CFO, Harriet Klein, had just come out of a briefing with the investor relations team. Numbers indicated that rumors of a discrimination scandal were circulating on social media and certain investor forums. While the chatter was small-scale, it could erode confidence in the brand and, by extension, their stock. And with an $800 million stock buyback on the horizon, they needed smooth waters, not controversies. CEO Victor Lang stared at Harriet across a sleek conference table. "How serious do you think this is?" His voice carried a tension that told Harriet he was already bracing for the worst. She adjusted her glasses. "Potentially very serious. If this hits major news outlets, it could turn into more than a PR crisis. It could invite federal scrutiny. The Department of Transportation has guidelines on discriminatory practices. If they launch an investigation, that complicates everything. Moreover, large institutional investors like BlackRock or Vanguard might back away from or question our buyback plan, given the negative optics. Lang cursed under his breath. So, what's your recommendation? Harriet cleared her throat. The passenger in question, Felicia Jefferson, is not just any passenger. She's on multiple philanthropic boards. She has deep connections in both government and media circles. From what our research shows, she's not someone we can just placate with a travel voucher. We need to handle this personally at the highest levels and ensure an amicable resolution. Lang drummed his fingers on the table. Fine. Let's consider inviting her to Dallas to discuss improvements. We'll show we're sincere. We'll release a statement about reinforcing our commitment to equality and fair treatment. In the meantime, keep the buyback plan under wraps. We can't have a meltdown in our stock price if this goes public. Harriet nodded. I'll try to get in touch with Miss Jefferson's team. But be advised, she's already made it clear she wants transparency and accountability. A mere promise might not cut it. Lang's jaw tightened. Then we'll offer more. Make it happen. Outside that conference room, rumors flew among employees. Most recognized that something big was at stake. But few knew the details, only that a single passenger had the potential to upend the company's strategic financial maneuver. It was the talk of the day in hallway whispers. Who was this woman capable of stopping an $800 million plan with just one call? Felicia's phone buzzed again, a direct call from Karen Jenkins at Morgan Stanley. She stepped aside from a philanthropic luncheon in Chicago to take it. Felicia, Karen began, voice urgent, I've heard from some colleagues that Global Skyway's stock buyback might be on hold. Word on the street is that they're trying to mitigate a potential PR crisis. Felicia felt her heart flutter. Could it really be that her predicament had escalated to freeze an $800 million corporate plan? She'd only demanded accountability, but she'd also dropped hints about that plan. Perhaps the airline had decided that forging ahead with the buyback amidst a looming scandal was too risky. Karen continued, They've not made a formal announcement, but internal sources say they're revisiting the timing. If they sense negative press or potential lawsuits, they'll want to avoid a buyback that might look like they're trying to prop up their share price artificially. Felicia paused near a set of tall glass windows, the city skyline towering outside. I never intended to tank their plans, Karen. I just wanted justice for being discriminated against. If the corporate world's attention is on them, maybe that's a good thing. It forces real change. Karen's tone softened. Exactly. Sometimes these corporations only respond when their bottom line is threatened. Now they're paying attention. How do you plan to proceed? Felicia drew a slow breath. They asked to talk more. I'm open to a meeting, but I won't let them just buy me off with empty promises. If they want my silence, they need real policy changes to ensure others aren't subjected to the same treatment. Karen laughed lightly. You're formidable. I respect that. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Morgan Stanley is in a tricky position since we have financial ties to Global Skyways, but I personally support you. Felicia offered a genuine thank you before ending the call. She stared at her reflection in the glass, hardly believing how rapidly events had unfolded. Less than 24 hours ago, she'd been forcibly moved from a seat. Now, the ripples of that injustice were shaking a multi-billion-dollar airline to its core. 3 days later, Felicia found herself on a flight back to Dallas, ironically, once again on Global Skyways. This time, the airline had spared no effort to ensure her journey was comfortable. A VIP representative escorted her through check-in, apologized repeatedly, and ushered her into a private lounge stocked with refreshments. Felicia accepted the hospitality with polite composure, yet remained guarded. She wasn't naive enough to let sleek lounges and apologetic smiles overshadow the main issue. The following morning, she arrived at the towering Global Skyways headquarters, glass facades shimmering under the Texas sun. A well-dressed executive assistant led her to the top floor into a sleek conference room where CEO Victor Lang, CFO Harriet Klein, and VP Michael Harrington waited. "Miss Jefferson," Lang greeted, extending his hand with a practiced corporate smile. "Thank you for coming." She shook his hand, studying him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me directly." They invited her to sit, offering water or coffee. She declined politely. The tension in the room crackled like static electricity. Finally, Lang cleared his throat. "We value you as a customer, Miss Jefferson, and we deeply regret your experience. We've launched an internal review of our seat assignment procedures and the behavior of the staff involved." Felicia nodded. "I appreciate that. But let's get to the heart of the matter. What tangible steps are you implementing to ensure no future passenger, regardless of their background, is subjected to this?" Harriet Klein leaned forward. "We are drafting a comprehensive training program for all gate agents, flight attendants, and ground staff, focusing on anti-discrimination and conflict resolution. We're also improving our software to prevent any vacant seat glitch. Additionally, the manager who forced you to move has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation." Felicia's jaw tightened at the mention of Robert Clark. "I'm glad you're taking that step, but you must understand, a training initiative is only as good as the accountability that follows. I expect a full disclosure of the investigation's findings." Lang hesitated. "Within reason, yes, we have to balance privacy laws for employees, but we'll be transparent about changes to our policies." Felicia offered a thin smile. "All right. And I'm also aware your company is planning an $800 million stock buyback. I assume you realize that if this investigation or changes are superficial, I won't hesitate to share my story. The public and your shareholders deserve to know if you're not serious about fair treatment." An uncomfortable hush fell over the room. Finally, Harrington spoke. "Miss Jefferson, we want you to know we take this extremely seriously. To demonstrate our commitment, we're willing to issue a public apology that names this incident, outlines the steps we're taking, and reaffirms our anti-discrimination stance." Felicia leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "That's a start, but I also want data. How many complaints like mine have you had in the past 5 years? How often has this vacant seat glitch happened? If I'm the first to come forward publicly, it doesn't mean I'm the only one who's experienced it." Klein glanced at Lang. He nodded gravely. "We're combing through records now. We can share anonymized statistics. If we find any pattern of misconduct, we'll address it directly." Felicia's voice softened slightly. "That's all I'm asking. My aim isn't to ruin your airline or sabotage your financial moves. But if it takes exposing wrongdoing to effect real change, I will." Lang exhaled, a mix of relief and nerves. "You have our word. Let's draft a formal agreement detailing these changes, and we'll release it publicly. In exchange, we hope you'll acknowledge that we're making every effort to rectify the situation." Felicia rose from her seat. "I came here seeking accountability, not revenge. If you deliver on these promises, I'll be the first to praise your efforts. But understand, if you renege on any of this, I'll take the matter straight to the press." Harriet offered her hand. "We won't fail you." Despite the tension, Felicia shook it. The meeting ended, but it felt more like a beginning, a cautious alliance formed under the pressure of potential scandal. Word spread quickly that Felicia Jefferson had met with Global Skyways' top brass. While no formal statement was out yet, insiders chattered on investor message boards, claiming the airline was scrambling to fix internal issues. The buyback was still on hold, which raised eyebrows in financial circles. Did one seat fiasco truly have the power to freeze an $800 million plan? In the days that followed, the stock price of Global Skyways dipped slightly. Some analysts predicted it would recover once the airline made a public announcement. Others warned that if the discrimination scandal exploded, it might trigger a broader sell-off. Late that week, Global Skyways released a carefully worded public statement. Global Skyways takes stand against bias, implements new training. Global Skyways announces a thorough review of its seat assignment policies and employee training programs to reinforce its commitment to equitable treatment for all passengers. This initiative, prompted by a recent incident involving Miss Felicia Jefferson, will include mandatory training for all frontline staff, enhanced software protocols, and a transparent investigation into any mishandling of passenger reservations. CEO Victor Lang stated, "We deeply regret any distress caused to Miss Jefferson and reaffirm that discrimination in any form has no place in our company. We are taking immediate steps to correct procedural gaps and ensure every traveler receives fair treatment." The company will also publish an annual report on passenger complaints, seat assignment errors, and resolution outcomes to maintain accountability and transparency. The statement went on to mention upcoming employee inclusivity workshops and a commitment to open dialogue with communities. Felicia read every line with a critical eye. It wasn't as strong as she'd hoped, but it was a public admission of fault and a promise of reforms. That alone marked a victory. She also noticed there was no mention of the paused stock buyback. Within hours, her phone pinged with messages from associates and journalists alike. Some praised her for forcing the company's hand. Others were skeptical, asking if this was mere PR spin. Felicia knew time would tell, but for now, seeing those words in an official statement felt like a step forward. At first glance, it seemed Global Skyways had a handle on the crisis. Their apology was out in the open. They were taking steps to address potential bias. Investors began speculating that the buyback might soon proceed, but then a new development blindsided everyone. An internal memo leaked, allegedly from a whistleblower inside the airline, revealing that seat reassignments based on preferred status were not rare. The memo detailed instructions from higher-ups to prioritize executive VIPs, influential sponsors, and high-value corporate accounts over regular paying passengers. Although the memo didn't explicitly mention race, it highlighted a system that easily enabled discriminatory practices, especially if staff carried unconscious or conscious biases. Overnight, the story on social media exploded. Hashtags like #GlobalSkywaysBias and #FlyingWhileBlack trended across Twitter. Major news outlets picked up the leaked memo. Journalists demanded interviews with Felicia. In short, the scandal was no longer about one seat for one passenger. It was about a pattern of favoritism that could, and likely did, disproportionately affect marginalized travelers. Global Skyways scrambled to control the narrative. CEO Lang issued another statement, claiming the memo was taken out of context and did not represent the company's values. But the damage was done. Skeptical consumers and outraged advocacy groups hammered them relentlessly. Within 48 hours, the airline's stock price dropped 9%. Investors, spooked by the negative press and potential lawsuits, started selling off. Felicia watched from a distance, disheartened by the revelations, but somewhat vindicated in her suspicion that her experience wasn't unique. She gave a single interview to a trusted journalist at Bloomberg, reiterating her stance, "This isn't about me personally, it's about ensuring the dignity of every passenger who pays for a seat. Global Skyways has made promises to address these issues, and I hold them to it." When asked if she felt responsible for the stock decline, Felicia was forthright. The airline's leadership is responsible for their policies. If those policies, explicit or implied, perpetuate discrimination or favoritism, then it's a systemic problem they must fix. The market is simply reacting to that reality. Global Skyways faced a mounting crisis. Lawsuits loomed. Civil rights organizations discussed joining forces for a class action complaint. The Department of Transportation confirmed it was reviewing the airline's practices. With each passing day, the prospect of a smooth buyback plan grew more distant. Internally, the board of directors convened emergency sessions to decide whether to postpone the buyback indefinitely. Their greatest fear was that going through with a massive stock purchase during a scandal would appear tone-deaf and could even invite allegations of market manipulation, buying shares on the cheap after negative press they themselves had caused. A meltdown of leadership ensued. Some board members called for immediate philanthropic outreach to communities of color, hoping to quell the backlash. Others insisted on firing the entire management team responsible for the memo. The tension peaked when CFO Harriet Klein presented a dire forecast. If we don't rectify this swiftly, we risk losing key corporate accounts, facing regulatory fines, and watching our stock plummet another 10–15%. The stock buyback, under these circumstances, might do more harm than good. Finally, after several sleepless nights for the executives, Global Skyways announced that the $800 million buyback plan was under strategic review and would be delayed. The official line was that they were waiting for market stability, but insiders knew the real reason. Felicia Jefferson's seat fiasco had escalated into a corporate crisis. Karma had arrived with a vengeance, toppling carefully laid plans in the face of public outrage and potential legal retribution. Amid the corporate turmoil, Felicia focused on her philanthropic work. She'd already concluded her meetings in Chicago and now returned to Atlanta to check on a youth entrepreneurship program she supported. Cameras followed her, local news stations hounding for a statement every time she made a public appearance. At each turn, she continued to redirect attention toward the broader issues of equity and fairness rather than her personal discomfort. Part of her wondered if she should have accepted the airline's initial private compensation. But that notion quickly faded. This wasn't just about her, and the scale of the airline's internal memo proved it. Her voice had become a rallying cry for all those who'd been treated as second class. Finally, an email arrived from Harriet Klein. "Dear Miss Jefferson, I understand the leak has amplified the situation far beyond our initial meeting. I want to assure you that Global Skyways remains committed to enacting the changes we discussed. The board has approved a comprehensive plan to overhaul seat assignment policies, train staff on bias reduction, and create a passenger rights oversight committee. I'll keep you informed of our progress. In these turbulent times, I hope we can maintain an open dialogue. Sincerely, Harriet Klein, CFO, Global Skyways." Felicia read it slowly. Despite her relief that they were still moving forward with reforms, she knew the sincerity of these measures would only be proven through long-term implementation, not corporate spin. With the airline's buyback on ice and their reputation in the crosshairs, investors outside the fiasco saw opportunity. Contrarian traders started buying up shares, betting that once the company resolved the scandal, the stock price would rebound. Meanwhile, for Felicia, life marched on. She had philanthropic dinners to attend, boards to advise, and up-and-coming entrepreneurs to mentor. But the next twist came unexpectedly one afternoon, when Felicia received a letter from a lawyer representing a group of former Global Skyways employees. It stated they had faced retaliation after complaining about discriminatory seat assignment practices. They were now organizing a class action lawsuit and invited Felicia to provide a statement. She weighed her options. Joining or publicly supporting a lawsuit could escalate her role in the scandal significantly. Yet it might also bring about real systemic change. After consulting with her legal counsel and moral compass, she agreed to submit a deposition recounting her experience. She made it clear she wasn't seeking monetary damages, but rather institutional accountability. When news of her involvement broke, it rekindled the media frenzy. Some business commentators labeled her a troublemaker, stirring the pot for publicity. Others lauded her courage and said she was leveraging her influence for justice. Felicia was no stranger to mixed public opinions, but it still stung. She pressed on, determined to transform the ordeal into a win for fair-minded travelers everywhere. As public pressure mounted, Global Skyways took drastic measures. CEO Victor Lang stepped down, citing personal reasons. Robert Clark, the manager who had removed Felicia from her seat, was fired after the internal investigation found multiple policy violations. A number of senior executives were reshuffled or replaced. The new CEO, Serena Mitchell, a woman of color with an impressive background in hospitality, made an immediate impression by standing at a podium, cameras flashing, and promising to make Global Skyways an industry leader in equitable treatment. It shouldn't take a scandal for a company to treat its customers and employees with respect and dignity, Mitchell said in her first press conference. I am here to ensure we rebuild trust from the ground up. Felicia watched the press conference live. She felt a flicker of hope. A leadership change might be the only real way to cleanse a corporate culture that had tolerated favoritism. She also received a phone call from Harriet Klein, who remained CFO. Serena Mitchell asked me to convey her gratitude for your willingness to highlight these issues, Harriet said. She'd like to meet you personally once the dust settles. Felicia smiled, but also felt a tinge of exhaustion. I'd be happy to talk to her, she replied, and I hope this isn't just another set of promises that fade once the headlines die. Harriet's tone was resolute. Not this time. We can't afford to ignore the lessons of this scandal. Believe me, our board has seen what happens when you do. Amid all the chaos, Felicia found quiet moments to reflect. She didn't revel in the company's downfall. People lost jobs, shareholders lost money. It was a sobering reminder that corporate negligence could harm many individuals, not just executives. But there was a form of poetic justice in how swiftly their carefully orchestrated buyback plan crumbled under the weight of a single injustice. Karma had manifested, not as a random cosmic force, but as a logical consequence of ignoring the basic principles of fairness. By refusing to respect a single passenger, one who happened to have a voice powerful enough to be heard, they invited scrutiny that ended up costing them far more than a first-class seat. The airline's brand took a hit that would take years to fully recover from. And while some employees blamed Felicia for sparking the crisis, others thanked her anonymously, saying the scandal had revealed deep-rooted issues that needed cleansing. In that sense, her ordeal was a catalyst for meaningful change, even if it came through upheaval. Months later, Felicia sat in her office, flipping through a folder containing an official report from Global Skyways. It outlined new protocols, improved diversity training, rigorous seat assignment checks, and the formation of a passenger advocacy board comprised of community leaders and consumer rights experts. According to the report, complaints about seat-related conflicts had dropped significantly, and staff satisfaction surveys indicated the new policies were making a tangible difference. She also learned that the airline's rebranded PR campaign emphasized inclusivity, featuring real customers from diverse backgrounds. They'd invited Felicia to participate, but she politely declined. She didn't want to be a poster child for an airline's redemption arc. At least, not yet. She preferred to wait, observe, and let actions speak louder than any glossy advertisement. Finally, a letter arrived with the airline's official apology, signed by the new CEO, Serena Mitchell. It was direct, heartfelt, and backed by real reforms. Felicia folded it neatly, placing it in a file labeled Progress. Looking out her office window, the sun setting behind skyscrapers, she felt a sense of closure. One small, humiliating incident had grown into a tsunami of change, proving that even a single voice, when backed by resolve and conscience, could reshape an entire corporation's policies and hold them accountable to the broader society they served. Life has an uncanny way of putting us exactly where we need to be, sometimes even in an airplane seat we paid for, only to watch it slip away in plain sight. What began as a demeaning moment for Felicia Jefferson sparked a wave of accountability that shook a giant corporation to its core. When Global Skyways chose to ignore her rightful place, they triggered an avalanche of public scrutiny, government interest, and legal ramifications. In the end, the airline faced its reckoning, postponing an $800 million stock buyback to address the very biases festering within its own system. Today, as new leadership and revised policies pave the way for a fairer flight experience, Felicia's story stands as proof that real change often starts with one person refusing to accept the unacceptable. If this story resonated with you, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that champion justice and transformation.